You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Tuesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, just as the intro said. And you can find their website at odysy1.com. Go on over and see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. And while you're there, this is owned by the Federation. And the Federation, Russ is our leader over there, and they are a Star Trek-based organization for fandom, but at the same time, they are also a humanitarian organization. Go check them out, see what they do. And you know what? I keep saying it. We got to get Russ on here to talk about the Federation. And we'll do that in the near future. If we can wrangle it this week, we'll try to make it happen. So go check them out. See what it's all about. And while you're at Odyssey, you can also see all the different outlets where this show plays. And you can come over to my YouTube channel to watch the video simulcast. And join the live chat room going on right now over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. That's me. And I've got a lot of commentary I would love to do on current events. The stuff about, Trump's secret police in Portland arresting people out of the crowd. Or as anarchists and those who are opposed to Trump and his government, they're saying it's non-uniformed officers of some sort, Trump's secret police kidnapping people is the way it's been put. And I will just say this. Sometimes that's the best way to achieve what you're trying to get done. With all the unrest, all the anarchy, all the destruction going on in Seattle, you know what? Sometimes it takes sending in some non-identified police to arrest those who are making problems. That's hardly kidnapping. Now, I'm willing to be corrected on that if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have a secret police in place that is kidnapping people, secretly torturing them in some kind of safe house somewhere. No, that's the implication. In all the articles you see, you don't see them citing why these people were picked up, what they did, what was going on, what was the result of them being picked up. You just hear that a couple of people were picked up by non-identified men in camouflage uniforms. So, to me, that states that the government is doing its work behind the scenes to break up what's going on in Seattle, when the local officials won't. So, let's leave that at that. So, things like that. I could talk about this stuff forever. And I have a lot more information I would share on that, but this show isn't about politics. And you know what? Frankly, I have to say, I don't see that as politics. I see that as current events, but it's being politicized by probably both sides of the equation. So we'll stay out of getting into that too deeply, other than to say, with all the unrest that's going on, protesting is constitutionally protected. You, me, everybody out there that's protesting right now has a right to protest, and it is guaranteed and protected by our Constitution. However, when protesters start taking over city blocks, harassing people, burning buildings, throwing dynamite in places. Now, that's not happened so much that I've heard of lately, but I had somebody bring up that argument. Man, back in the day, we used to, bomb ROTC offices. It's like, well, good for you. That's illegal activity. That's not protest. Now, they're coloring this all in the skin, painting it in the colors, dressing it in the skin of this is rebellion. This is protest. This is protest to the point of revolution. This is a revolution. And even Thomas Jefferson said, as we've mentioned here before, that this nation will require a little revolution every 20 years or so to maintain its existence. And I get that, and I understand that. But these people are who are out there doing these things to common folk out there are suddenly trying to use the argument that this is revolution. It's not revolution, it's rioting. It's anarchy, it's unrest. There is a difference between that and revolution. You've got people who hate this country but won't leave it. They just want to change it into something that it was never meant to be. And now that's a general skin that I'm putting on what I see going on out there. Now people will say, even things like these last few weeks where I've been talking about Native America and talking about the conquest of the American West, that this fits so beautifully into the picture of the oppressed Black America, oppression going on now, and it's nothing of the sort. This is a reminder of our history, of what we've done, that the United States isn't a perfect country, that the United States has committed atrocity. The United States is not always puritanical. The United States has sometimes justified its bad activity by putting clean, colorful labels on it. I look at things like, how am I supposed to feel? How are we supposed to feel in light of all the things I've talked about here now? Things like Mount Rushmore, where we've put some of our great leaders of the past on a stone face that was once the most sacred mountain in Pahasapa to the Native Americans. Was that done as a slap in the face? And of course now they're coming out and saying that the guy who was behind the original carving was a member of the KKK. And so all of a sudden you're seeing everything that has any kind of heritage connected to it. You start looking into the personal lives of people and you start wanting to tear it down. I say you leave it. It's part of our heritage. I would love to see the man who is building the great monument to Crazy Horse on the same scale as Mount Rushmore. He's been at that for many, many, many years, and I don't even know all the details about that. I don't know if the original guy is still working on it. I think it started a very long time ago, maybe even before I was born. I have to get my facts straight on that one. But I would love to see that funded as a piece of art and continued as part of our heritage. And go look it up, the big statue. It's not even a statue, the monument, the stone carving to Crazy Horse. And you can see some of the details on that. So all of this, I look at that and I say, Mount Rushmore, should it be taken down because of where it was originally put and perhaps reasons behind why it was put where it was put? No, that is still part of our heritage. And so that involves a conversation all on its own, and we'll get there. That's one of the things I would like to talk to Ruben Fasthorse about and get his take on that. So history is history. Recounting history is amoral, despite the fact that we look into the things that we did that were not moral. Our country, along with every country that has ever existed, has committed wrongdoings, atrocities. We cannot sidestep that issue. That is also part of who we are. But I still believe in America. America is not a bad country. It's not a blight on the world. America is a country where it was founded for the purpose of evolving into better and better things. And the revolution, by the way, that started 250 years ago was a revolution to not be like what you see with the anarchists today. It was a revolution that was bent on saying, look, we are a people who has been here as colonies for over 100 years. We've built this. Now we have a representative government with the king, but it's tyrannical. The parliament and the king run this country as a source of income. They don't run it as a land for free people. And so they broke ties with England, saying, "You are governing us without representation. You are taxing us without representation." So one of the big things, and we've heard it ad infinitum, taxation without representation, was one of the big issues for the founding of the United States. And so the revolution that took place back then also wasn't a revolution where if they protested against the government and they dumped a bunch of tea in the harbor, they didn't go from the boat where they dumped the tea to their neighbors' businesses and start burning them down in an anarchist rage. There was a pointed goal to reach, and that was independence as the colonies, making of their own nation. Now, if the anarchists today want to make their own nation, go do it somewhere else. If you want to take over a couple of city blocks in Seattle, that ain't going to cut it. Because you know what? If we had, during the American Revolution, if the British had beat us in the colonies, we'd still be Great Britain today. Now, is that such a bad thing? Maybe after 250 years in retrospect, we'd just be another branch of Great Britain. We'd be like Canada, part of the United Kingdom. But we didn't. We created our own nation. And now I'm just shooting from the hip here, folks. I'm just talking off the top of my head. I don't have facts laid out in front of me or made this a concise syntax so we can talk about this like an essay. I'm just rolling this off the top of my head. So right now, we are the product of genius founders who were futurists, who, despite the fact that they held slaves, still said all men were created equal, and found the inconsistency and lived with that inconsistency and said over and over again, we must solve this problem. And we did. It took about 80 to 90 years for us to resolve that problem. And right now, I don't even want to get into it any deeper than that because I'm going to start talking about what privilege is, what privilege isn't. I'm going to start talking about oppression and what oppression isn't. I'm going to start talking about freedom and liberty to pursue your happiness. All the government guarantees us, all the Constitution guarantees us, is the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Constitution cannot guarantee you the fulfillment of happiness, the fulfillment of your dreams. It is hard work to get there. Now, I will self-admit, I'm a lazy ass. I don't work as hard as I could. The last few years after I had my surgeries and so on, I had some downtime that really knocked the mickey out of me. And I wasn't as productive. I'm barely starting to feel like I'm getting out of that haze. And I felt awfully darn lazy. There were days I would come in here and stare at my work and couldn't accomplish it. There were days I would stand, it was like my physical shape, because of the shape I got in after that. I would stand at the stairway in my house to go upstairs and stare at it for 10 minutes, realize I'm in a fog. I would stare at it because I knew starting to tackle those stairs would cause pain. Now maybe that pain was the great first step to overcoming the issues that have been created by my health issues. But at the time, that was the hardest thing to accomplish. And I'm just barely starting to come out of that. So many times I find myself up and my mind is on, my brain is on in the morning. I'm doing my stuff. I can sit and do my work on the computer. I can do this radio show. But when it comes to standing up and doing physical activity, it goes away really quick because my brain is set in that mode. Now, I only bring that up to say that's the way that my hard work has been of late. It's been tough to get hard work done. And it's a mental thing. And so you've got to set your mind to saying, I need to work hard. I've worked hard my whole life. Am I wealthy? No. I had somebody last week somebody had put up a post on Facebook talking about, we need to tax the wealthy more. And I came and I said, why? Why should you tax the wealthy more? They already carry 97% of the tax burden, the wealthy. And I say, what's wrong with being wealthy? Well, they built it on the backs of their workers. I said, well, didn't those people start with nothing? For the most part. Start at the bottom and built a business up. And let me ask you a question. If you owned your own business and you started that business from nothing, you put in your hard work, you came out of the workforce and said, I'm going to invest my money and I've got a little bit of money over here. I'm going to make this thing work. And you spend years trying to make that work for you. And whoa, lo and behold, after 15 years, you become an overnight success and you've made it. And you've hired people. You've got people working for you. Those people who came to work for you, you paid them a good salary. You worked a contract with them and said, for this amount of money per hour or per week or per month or per annum, I will hire you to do this job for me. And yet you find, and these are old arguments, I had them 10 years ago with people, somebody in the medical field, not a doctor, supportive staff, was arguing that they don't make enough money. And they're against the man. They were almost anarchist about it. And I said, well, didn't you agree to work for that wage? Now, you can request a wage increase. You could even strike if you are a part of a union. But now you're belittling the people who hired you and gave you that job and helped you make your living because they make more money than you? Well, didn't they start the company? Isn't it their company? Didn't they give you the job? Doesn't the person who spent 15 to 20 years starting a company and finally accomplishing some good goals have the right to be able to buy to buy an RV, to buy a motor coach, to take 2 vacations a year, to have more money than the people that work for them? Does that mean that they are heartless and they do not pay their people well, or they do not give bonuses, or they do not reward their people who work for them, their employees? No, it means that they're the ones who founded the company, and it's okay if they're doing better than you are. And is that on the backs of the worker, as, Marxism would tell you? No. So I have a problem with that, what's going on nowadays. I don't know where I started with that little rant, but there it is. Oh, somebody accused me of being wealthy the other day. Well, you can say all that about taxes, and you can say that you don't think we should tax the wealthy because, well, you were born... Get this, folks. I was told by, and it was a young person, I was told, well, you were born with a silver platter. And I said, really? You think I was born with a silver platter? I said, let me tell you something. I said, my parents were divorced when I was 6 months old. I said, I didn't even know my dad until I was 16, and then we didn't even strike off a relationship until I was in my 30s. I said, so my mom was a single mom in her 20s with 3 kids, working as a waitress, living off of tips, living off of, I can't remember what it's called, ADC or something like that in Minnesota, back in the 60s and the 70s. In other words, food stamps, public assistance. We existed because my grandfather helped my mom whenever he could financially. He didn't raise us, but he helped out. So we grew up poor. We didn't know we were poor, the kids. My mom probably did. I think my mom was working. I remember asking my mom back in the late 60s. She was commenting, she was cooking dinner or something. She'd commented on how much money doctors make. And I said, well, how much does a doctor make? She goes, well, I wish I had that kind of money. And I said, well, how much do they make? And she said, oh, probably $20,000 a year or more. Now, that was her perspective in the 60s. Think of that now in terms of today. A doctor considered well off financially, when my mom's perception was that they made $20,000 a year. That's now, times have changed, certainly. But I'm sure doctors were probably making a little more than that. But my mom, in the late 60s, early 70s, said if we were making $20,000 a year, we'd be sitting on top of the heap. That shows you the kind of money she did make. Probably half of that. And so, if that, she worked as a waitress. And so we grew up that way. When I was 17, the silver platter that I grew up with, when I was 17, I graduated high school and I set off on my own. I went to school. I paid my own way through school. I worked a job while I was in school. I worked in a men's suit store, retail store, in a small town where I went to a small Bible college. I worked in the canning factory there. I worked my way through school. When I went to seminary to get my master's degree, I worked a job on the side. I paid my own way. I didn't have any grants. I didn't have any funds that were thrown my way. But I worked hard to get there. Then I ended up going into advertising. I had one thing going for me. I was an artist. And I tried to hone that skill from the time I was 17 years old. I worked as an artist when I was in high school. I started working as an artist in a print shop. And that went on into my adulthood. And even when I was in seminary, I started working as an art director. A graphic designer first, then an art director, then a creative director. And I was in that for 30 years. And then I went off on my own as a freelancer. And that's a roller coaster. That's up and down. And so all of this to say, I said to this person, if you think that's being born with a silver platter being presented to me, you're wrong. And of course, what we were talking about was taxing the wealthy. Then somebody wanted to change that into white privilege. I said, you've totally changed the topic. And so this is my take on all of this, is that it's hard work that gets us where we are. I've done a lot of things over the course of my life. I've been involved in starting all kinds of little businesses. Never having anything that it was highly successful or that brought me great wealth to relax on. I can't retire on anything. I'm going to be 60 in 3 months. And you know what? I don't have money to fall back on. So I work hard. I still work hard. When we did the Paradigm Symposiums, we worked hard to do that. When I started the magazine, we worked hard to do that. I attempted to start a small publishing company, a comic book publishing company, back in the 80s and in the 90s. And you know what? I never got it off the ground, but I still did some publishing. So there are many things I've been involved with, hard work to try to make things happen, to try to make things work. And so all that to say, it takes hard work to get ahead and to become successful and to pursue life, or to have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You want to watch a good movie? It's the same name. The Secret to Happiness, or Pursuing Happiness. And it's HAPPY-NESS. The Pursuit of Happiness. I think that's what the title is. It's a Will Smith movie. It was made several years ago. It's a true story of a black man who started from nothing and worked to make it. And eventually did. You want to see a good movie? That's probably being blocked now because it shows a black man who succeeded because he was an American. That's my cynical take on that. But go look that up. The Secret to Happiness, or The Pursuit of Happiness, with Will Smith. Look it up and watch that if you haven't seen it. Well worth seeing. And you know what? I'm already at the end of my time for the first segment. We didn't even get into today's, I want to call it a lesson, today's story, today's show. So sit tight. We'll come back right after this break and we'll get into it.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, folks, thanks for sitting on through that break. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, ODYSY1.com. Come on over, watch the video simulcast, and join the live chat room during this broadcast at my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Now, I used up the whole first half ranting. I don't know if it's a rant, a rambling, let's put it that way. Let's move off from that and get back into what we were talking about last night. We were looking at how the United States military was now moving on Black Kettle's encampment down below the Arkansas River. They were chasing the dog soldiers out who wouldn't sign the treaties. And when people finally signed the treaties, the United States didn't keep up its end of the deal. No matter what the reason was, there were problems on the side of the United States, I get that, but they were promising certain things in exchange for the land. The Indians were saying, why don't we just live here together peaceably? But that's not what the United States wanted. The United States wanted to own the land. So they pushed them off. They found a way to create a treaty that would push the Indians off onto reservation land and give the whites, the eastern United States, the land that they lived on. And so we expanded into that territory, and now it was trying to push them all off. And we left off with the Custer's 7th Cavalry riding in on a snowy morning out of the mist and attacking Black Kettle's settlement. And of course there was no warning. They didn't expect that they were going to be attacked for any reason. And finally Black Kettle scooped up his wife onto his horse, his pony, and they ran. And they were dreaming the same nightmare all over again while they were fleeing from screaming bullets. A big flashback of the Sand Creek Massacre. Now, Black Kettle and his wife, they were almost to the ford when he saw the charging cavalrymen in their heavy blue coats and fur caps. And Black Kettle slowed his pony, and he lifted his hand in a gesture of peace. A bullet burned into his stomach, and his pony swerved. Another bullet caught him in the back, and he slid into the snow at the river's edge. Several bullets knocked his wife off beside him, and the pony ran away. Now the cavalrymen splashed across the ford, riding right over Black Kettle and his wife, splattering mud upon their dead bodies. Here's Black Kettle, who had only wanted to pursue peace with the white man, who had a settlement that was peaceful, who had obeyed and had gone south of the Arkansas River. And now they're raiding him as well. Custer's orders from Sheridan were explicit: to proceed south in the direction of the Antelope Hills, thence toward the Washita River, the supposed winter seat of the hostile tribes, to destroy their villages and their ponies, to kill or hang all warriors, and to bring back all women and children. That was the mandate given to Custer. And you can find this in Sheridan's Troopers on the Borders. And this was written by de Benville Randolph Keim. And it's from 1885, but this is the report on that. So, in a matter of minutes, Custer's troops destroyed Black Kettle's village. Just boom, done. In another few minutes of gory slaughter, they destroyed by gunfire several hundred corralled ponies. To kill or hang all the warriors meant separating them from the old men, the women, and the children. This work was too slow and dangerous for the cavalrymen. They found it much more efficient and safe to kill them all indiscriminately. So they killed 103 Cheyenne, but only 11 of them were warriors, and they captured 53 women and children. Now, by this time, gunfire echoing down the valley brought a swarm of Arapaho from their nearby village, and they joined the Cheyenne in a rearguard action. And a party of Arapaho surrounded a pursuit platoon of 19 soldiers under Major Joel Elliott, and they killed every man. Why shouldn't they? They're under attack. They're indiscriminately, these troops are killing their women and their children and their old men. And so about noon of this day, the Kiowa and the Comanche were arriving from farther downriver. And when Custer saw the increasing number of warriors on the nearby hills, he rounded up his captives, and without searching for the missing Major Elliott, he started back north in a forced march toward his temporary base at Camp Supply on the Canadian River. Now, at Camp Supply, General Sheridan was eagerly awaiting news of Custer's victory. Victory. How can you righteously claim victory when you are killing indiscriminately civilians, women and children? It's not a war. It was a slaughter. It was a massacre. You've got Black Kettle, who put up his hand in peace. Stop. And they shot him down, he and his wife. So he was waiting for news of Custer's victory, and when he was informed that the cavalry regiment was returning, he ordered the entire post out for a formal review, and with the band blaring triumphantly, the victors marched in. They waved the scalps of Black Kettle and the other dead savages. And Sheridan publicly congratulated Custer for, quote, efficient and gallant services rendered, end quote. In his official report of the victory over the savage butchers and the savage bands of cruel marauders, General Sheridan rejoiced that he had wiped out old Black Kettle, a worn-out and worthless old cipher, quote unquote. Then he stated that he had promised Black Kettle sanctuary if he would come into a fort before military operations began. He refused. Sheridan lied and was killed in the fight. This is what Sheridan said. This is a lie. This is the U.S. War Department report of 1869. You can find it. Tall Chief Wynkoop, who had already resigned in a gesture of protest against Sheridan's policies, was far away in Philadelphia when he heard the news of Black Kettle's death. Now, Wynkoop charged that his old friend had been betrayed. Black Kettle had been betrayed more than once by the U.S. government, and he met his death at the hands of white men in whom he had too often fatally trusted and who triumphantly report the fact of his scalp in their possession. This is Black Kettle. This is the man who was always pursuing peace, the man who got his own warriors pissed off at him over the years because he wanted peace. Peace with the white man. So other white men who had known and liked Black Kettle also attacked Sheridan's war policy, but Sheridan brushed them aside as good and pious ecclesiastics, aiders and abettors of savages who murdered without mercy men, women, and children. This is also a matter of record. The great warrior Sherman gave Sheridan his support, however, and ordered him to continue killing hostile Indians and their ponies, but at the same time advised that he establish the friendly Indians in camps where they could be fed and exposed to the white man's civilized culture. The white man's civilized culture. What were they doing out of Black Kettle's camp south of the Arkansas? Were they hostiles? No, we've already established that fact. What about Sand Creek? Earlier, when Black Kettle, a few years earlier, had flown the flag given to him, the United States flag, that was supposed to be the symbol to any army that he was under protection of the U.S. government. And when they raided Sand Creek, if you remember, when they raided Sand Creek, Black Kettle stood there under the flag. And all the people, the women and the children, came and grouped themselves around them, standing under the protective flag of the United States, and they were still mown down. So, bring the friendly Indians into camps where they could be fed and exposed to the white man's civilized culture. This is one of the great sins of the United States. Or at least the men who were in charge of the Indian problem out west. So in response to this, Sheridan and Custer moved on to Fort Cobb, and from there they sent out runners to the 4 tribes in the area, warning them, not inviting them, warning them to come in and make peace or else they'd be hunted down and killed. So in other words, not doing what the government told them to do equated them with being hostile and savages that needed to be killed. Custer himself went out in search of friendly Indians, and for this field operation, he requisitioned one of the more attractive young women from his Cheyenne prisoners to go with him. She was listed as an interpreter, although she didn't know any English. Late in December, the survivor of Black Kettle's band began arriving. And by the way, you see what the implication was there? Custer got one of the best-looking young Native American women to take along with him as an interpreter, but she didn't speak a lick of English. What was going on there? So late in December, the survivors of Black Kettle's band began arriving at Fort Cobb. They had to come on foot because Custer had killed all their ponies in the raid on Black Kettle's camp. Little Robe was now the nominal leader of the tribe, and when he was taken to see Sheridan, he told the bear-like soldier chief that his people were starving. Remember what they said earlier? Sherman said to Sheridan? He said, establish the friendly Indians in camps where they could be fed and exposed to the white man's civilized culture. He said that his people were starving. Custer had burned their winter meat supply. They could find no buffalo along the Washita, and they had eaten all of their dogs. So Sheridan replied that the Cheyenne should be fed if they all come into Fort Cobb and surrendered unconditionally. You cannot make peace now and commence killing whites again in the spring, Sheridan added. If you're not willing to make a complete peace, you can go back and we'll fight this thing out. Little Robe knew that there was but one answer he could give. It's for you to say what we have to do. That's what he told him. And that's a quote. That quote, I'm looking for the actual quote I have here. That comes out of Sheridan's papers, which were published January 1st of 1869. And so Little Robe said, it is for you to say what we have to do. A completely defeated man and people. Yellow Bear of the Arapaho also agreed to bring in his people to Fort Cobb a few days later. And Tasawi brought in the first band of Comanches to surrender. When he was presented to Sheridan, Tasawi's eyes brightened. He spoke his own name and added 2 words of broken English. Tasawi, good Indian, he said. It was then that General Sheridan uttered the immortal words, quote, "The only good Indian that I've ever seen, the only good Indians I've ever seen were dead," end quote. From where we got, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Again, for emphasis, Tasawi said, "Tasawi, good Indian." He smiled at Sheridan. He brightened. "Tasawi, good Indian." And Sheridan responded, "The only good Indians I ever saw were dead." So Lieutenant Charles Nordstrom, who was present, remembered the words and passed them on, until in time they were honed into an American aphorism, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." Let that sink in. These were the people in charge of taking care of the Indian problem in the West. This all took place in Kansas. Now, during that winter, the Cheyenne and the Arapaho and some of the Comanches and the Kiowas lived off the white man's handouts at Fort Cobb. Now, by the way, I think you can still go to Fort Cobb and visit it today. I know Fort Larned is still there. You can go see it. You can go visit these historic sites. As Steve in our chat room last night said, you can see the reenactments they do of the peace treaty signing from... That's slipping my mind here because I don't have it in front of me. You can go see that being reenacted nowadays. Even. So in the spring of 1869, the United States government decided to concentrate all the Comanche and all the Kiowa around Fort Sill, S-I-L-L. And while the Cheyenne and the Arapaho were assigned a reservation camp around Camp Supply, some of the dog soldier bands had remained far north in their camps on the Republican River. Others under Tall Bull had come south for rations and for protection. So while the Cheyenne were moving up the Washita from Fort Cobb to Camp Supply, Little Robe quarreled with Tall Bull, accusing him and his young men of causing much of the trouble with the soldiers. Because these guys, these dog soldiers, they were still fighting for their rights, and they were still attacking the soldiers. And he got into a quarrel with them, Little Robe and Tall Bull. The dog soldier chief in turn accused Little Robe of being weak like Black Kettle, who was now dead, and of bowing before the white men. Tall Bull declared that he would not settle down within the confines of the poor reservation chosen for the Cheyenne below the Arkansas. And the Cheyenne had always been a free people, he said. What right had the white men to tell them where they should live? They should remain free or die, he said. Is this the way you would talk about your nation, your home, your country, your property? Live free or die. Wasn't that a phrase of the American Revolution? Live free or die? We adopted that same thing. Live free or die. That's what Tall Bull declared. And did he not have a right to do this? Was he not being invaded by another country who was stronger than he was? So Little Robe angrily ordered Tall Bull and his dog soldiers to leave the Cheyenne reservation forever. Out, out. I don't need your trouble. These are people that had lived through all of this trouble and relocation and death and massacre and had nothing but what the white man gave them. Tall Bull proudly reported that he would take his people north and join the northern Cheyenne, who with Red Cloud Sioux had driven the white men from the Powder River country earlier. And so, as they had done after Sand Creek, the southern Cheyenne divided again. Now remember, after Sand Creek, Black Kettle said, I'm done. I can't do this. I've got to save my people, and the only way to do that is to capitulate. But there were still warriors who went north. And so almost 200 dog soldier warriors and their families started north with Tall Bull. And in May, the moon when the ponies shed, they joined the bands who had stayed through the winter on the Republican River. And as they were preparing for the long and dangerous march to the Powder River country, Sheridan sent a cavalry force under General Eugene A. Carr, C-A-R-R, to search them out and destroy them. To search them out and destroy them, because they were not coming into the reservation. They were standing and fighting their ground, holding their ground. This is my land. And so Carr, to search them out and destroy them. Carr's soldiers found the dog soldier camp and attacked it as forcefully as Custer had struck Black Kettle's village. And this time, however, a band of warriors sacrificed their lives in a delaying action and thus managed to keep the women and children from being captured. By scattering in small groups, the Indians escaped Carr's pursuit parties, and after a few days, Tall Bull reassembled the warriors and led them on a revenge raid to the Smoky Hill. They ripped out 2 miles of track along the halted railroad. They attacked small settlements. They killed as mercilessly as the soldiers had killed their people. War is shitty and war is hell, but can you imagine being a people like they were? They were defending their right to live. Remembering that Custer had taken Cheyenne women as prisoners, Tall Bull took 2 surviving white women from a ranch house. Both were German immigrants. Maria Weichel, Weichel, I think it is, W-E-I-C-H-E-L, and Susanna Allerdus. And none of the Cheyenne could understand any of the words they said, because they were German immigrants. These white women were troublesome, but Tall Bull insisted that they be taken along as prisoners and treated as the Cheyenne women had been treated by the Bluecoats. So to avoid the pony soldiers who were searching everywhere now, Tall Bull and his people had to keep changing camps and moving about. And they worked their way gradually westward across Nebraska and into Colorado. And it was July before Tall Bull could bring his band together at Summit Springs, where he hoped to cross the Platte River. Because of a high water in the river, they had to make a temporary camp. Tall Bull sent some of the young men to mark a crossing in the stream with sticks. This was in the moon when the cherries are ripe and the day was very hot, and most of the Cheyenne were resting in the shade of their lodges. And by chance that very same day, Major Frank North's Pawnee scouts found the trail of the fleeing Cheyenne. Now, these Pawnee were the same mercenaries who 4 years before had gone into the Powder River country with General Connor and had been chased out by Red Cloud's warriors. So with scarcely any warning, the Pawnee and General Carr's Bluecoats charged into Tall Bull's camp. They came in from the east and the west, so the only way of escape for the Cheyenne was to the south. The ponies were running in every direction, the men were trying to catch them, and the women and children were fleeing on foot. Many couldn't get away, and Tall Bull and about 20 others took cover in a ravine, and among them were his wife and child and the 2 German women captives. When the Pawnee mercenaries and the soldiers charged into camp, a dozen warriors died defending the mouth of the ravine. Tall Bull took his hatchet and cut holes in the side of the ravine so that he could climb up to the top and fire at the attackers. He fired once, then ducked down. And when he rose to fire again, a bullet smashed into his skull, obviously killing him. During the next few minutes, the Pawnee and the soldiers overran the ravine. All the Cheyenne except Tall Bull's wife and child were dead. Both of the German women had been shot, but one was still alive. The white men said that Tall Bull had shot the white captives, but the Indians never believed he would have wasted his bullets in such a foolish way. Roman Nose was dead. Black Kettle was dead. Tall Bull was dead. Now they were all good Indians. Like the antelope and the buffalo, the rank of the proud Cheyenne were starting to thin to extinction. So this is the result of the white United States government, white basically, moving into the West and starting to squeeze that whole territory of Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, squeezing them out. And they kept killing off those who would fight for their land. Because, and why were they fighting in the first place? They were fighting because they were being driven off their land. They were fighting because the U.S. cavalry, the U.S. Army, kept coming in and massacring their villages. Why were their villages being massacred? Because the Indians broke the treaties. Why did they break the treaties? Because the United States government broke the treaties. Weren't giving them the things that they said. And it wasn't like welfare where they had their hand out. It was that the United States government said, we will give you this if you do this. And so the Indians did that, but didn't get what the white government had promised. And so they would do things like go out and hunt, which was against the treaty. And then their bands would be killed. And then in retaliation to their bands of hunters being killed, their villages being wiped out, they would go and enact raids on white settlers, mostly on military outposts, the railroad, the telegraph, and the fight just kept escalating. The only opportunity they had to stay alive was complete surrender and capitulation to what was being demanded of them. The whites kept breaking the treaties, giving them, I keep saying the whites, it was the United States government, kept making treaties, kept breaking those treaties, kept not fulfilling their promises, which left the Native Americans to fight for what they could get, break the treaties and hunt, and then retaliate when they were being killed. This is a blot on United States history. Some would justify it and say, hey, the Native Americans are a conquered people. It's what we did back then. Yeah, it is what we did back then. That was the paradigm of the day. Would you have done differently back then? Would you have thought differently if you were a white settler? I'm not talking about 21st century mentality. I'm talking about set yourself back in history. How would you have acted? Would the Indians have been justified in their reactions? But now, as we see now, the Cheyenne were almost completely wiped out into extinction. And that's where we're done for tonight. Bleak history, folks, but necessary that we know this as we move forward as a people. To never do these things again. I hope you got something good out of this tonight. We're going to take a 23-hour break and we'll be back tomorrow night. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.